Hi guys, it's nice Sunday night and it's another time for Dash Animation System Devcast. The update 0.2.5 is coming, still in beta as usual. So I'm going to talk about the updates and show some additional stuff that I didn't show before, and also some breaking changes that are already in this version, because as I said, in this beta period there will be some breaking changes. Nothing major, but something that that you need to keep in mind. So let's start with some uh, with the news for the new version. So one of the big news is that there is no enter exit node as there were before, because now with the additional functionality, for example, of subgraphs and stuff like that, there is a need for dynamic number of inputs and dynamic number of outputs from a graph. So now you can create any number of inputs, and you can have them named as you want. They need to have a unique names, so the framework automatically detect the name if it's already there, and if it's there, it will try to add a number to it. So if there is already a test, we are getting test one. The same way, you can create any number of outputs. This has additional impact on the auto start mechanics. So now if you set the dash control to auto start, you need to specify the input you want to start with. If I set that it's an input 1 or a test 1, it will not run, and it will tell you that there is no input named test, so I need to specify a valid input, and it will start as usual. Next breaking change is the variables. So now if you animate or if you use the variable name inside the expression, it no longer needs the g underscore prefix. I got a feedback that it was kind of confusing. People didn't really grasp it, and they need to remember that they see this name and they didn't really know why there needs to be the G. So now the names are as you see them in the graph variable window, but since the G underscore prefix was to avoid collision with an attribute inside the node flow data, now the both are evaluated on node flow data at first and then at graph variables. So if you have a variable that's also inside the node flow data, the node flow data will take precedence. So this opened additional functionality for us. So if I switch to this, if you remember correctly, there is this. There was this. If I played, there was this functionality we did in the last video where you specified the type and amount, and we weren't able to debug this inside the previews because it was purely driven by the node flow data from here. But since now all these names you have here uh, can also reference the variables, I can have a default values inside my graph variables, and it will use them, because as I said, it will try to evaluate this name, for example this okay, here this sprite inside the attributes, inside the node flow data, but since it's not there, it will go deeper, it will go into graph variables, and it's there. So we can uh, try to use that. So for example, if I wanted these gem, okay, I need this 128 one, this one. It will go to the gold, but I can also specify the type. and now you see you can basically set the default values and you can preview it instead of running it all the time. Now if I run it, this will be ignored, so I can specify 2 and it will go with the lucky ones. So this is useful for debugging as well. Additional change is that I'm adding reserved variables inside the resolver. So some of the stuff that was, for example, an attribute is no longer needed. So as I said in the last video, there was a controller attribute. I said that each Nodeflow data has 2 basic attributes, and one is a target, which we are using for retargeting, and the second one is controller, that will always refer to the controller. There was no need to have this as an attribute because it's always a controller on the graph. So if you specify, for example, I think it's used in this retargeting. If you specify this attribute named controller, as you can see, it's nowhere to be found, but it works. It is a reserved name, and it will be auto resolved internally by the graph resolver as a controller on this graph. There is no need, even if you are programming the events, there is no need to specify it yourself explicitly. For example, time is another reserved variable. If you specify time there, you don't need to specify it anywhere here, and it will automatically resolve as a current time. There will be additional reserved variables. I will put them down into documentation as well. So let's go. I think this is all the. Let's switch to this demo. This is all the breaking changes as far as I see it. So let's go over some new features of this version. So one of the new features is the new context menu. I even released this separately, so those who follow me on YouTube, for example, you know that I released the generic context menu I'm using for Machina and now for Dash as well as a separate project, so you can use it in your projects if you want to. So it's now uh, part of Dash as well. If you the default setting is still this type of Unity context menu, but you can go here to use advanced menu. It's for testing for the moment. I will probably remove this, and if you now set this, it will automatically use the advanced context menu I created, so with the search functionality. So you can search the nodes you want to create, and automatically you also have the information about the node available. So since there will be a lot of more nodes later, so that's why I am created this type of context menu. I also need it in other parts that I'm planning, so I think this will be helpful. Additional new features is comments and boxes that were added due to the feedback as well. So there were some kind of comments previously, but they didn't really work well, so I refactored them. So you can create a comment on the node like this. Comments don't zoom, so you always see the comments. It's like in Unreal Engine 4, for example, and you can create the comments on that node if you want. So you can also disable the comment. So that's useful. Also, if I create a comment, it's part of the advanced node, so it's serialized here as well, so you can see it there. So if I change it, for example, here, it will be the same thing. Additional functionality is boxes, again inspired by many frameworks, node-based frameworks like Unreal or, for example, Houdini. So you can create some nodes and then create a box. And again, you can comment it. You can even comment it here or here. You can specify the color for it. I like the black one. And it works similarly to Unreal Engine. It moves all the nodes that are part of the box by default. You can disable it, so it will move without the nodes. And if you add a node there, for example, like this, it will move with it. It's similar to Unreal Engine 4, and it's quite useful for organizing stuff. You can also delete it, obviously. Additional new functionality is that there is a performance optimization. If you zoom out the nodes, it will switch to a simpler mode. As you can see, you don't no longer see the texts there because they were not readable anyway, so that's what I decided to do. Uh, Next thing that's new in UI is searching for nodes. So show node IDs was part of the old versions, but I just enabled it to show you the IDs because you can now search the nodes based on the ID. So now you see the IDs of the nodes. They are unique. So if I try to rename it to a node uh, that already exists, it will tell it. It will generate a unique ID, similar to input names. So if you, for example, you have a huge graph and if you see an error uh, with a node ID and you cannot find it, there is a new functionality, node search. So let's say I want to. It will also find all the nodes that contain part of the string that you specified. So if I am looking for animation nodes, I can basically, and it will also jump to the node as well. So I can basically tell it to Ani and it will rotate. Now we are going through all the animation nodes. If I want to look for debug, if we have any, okay, there is only single debug node, so I jumped to that. So it's also in preferences. Okay, now what's new? There is a new functionality, a new node called Animate with Preset. I don't think I'm using it here, so let's just try using it on something. Well, let's say the title. So I will disable this one. So there is an animation with preset. This will be a complex node that you can utilize. Okay, so let's just say this, retarget it to use reference and use the title. Okay, and here you can select the preset you want to use. There is only a single preset at the moment, so let's just preview it if it's there. Okay. You can see it works a bit, but now roll back a bit. If there is a no preset selected, you don't see any properties of the preset, obviously. If I select the preset, it will automatically add the properties for the specified preset. We will get to how this works in a minute. I just want to show you the preset. So let's say now we are shaking. It's a shake preset, so it should shake the transform by 1 pixel. It's not really visible, and how many shakes we want to do, and if you want to fade the shakes. So basically, the function is fading. Anyway, let's try it like this, and as you can see, it works. Let's boost it a bit more, instant. So it basically shakes the title. Cool and all, but the functionality of this node and its importance is way bigger. This is especially should be used for example, if you have programmers, a lot of programmers, and if you have specific effects that are tedious to basically be driven by all these nodes, but you want to utilize them in a single node. For example, this shake. If I wanted to create a shake graph, I can do it. I can have a bunch of animate and anchored position nodes, but it's tedious. I can save it as a graph and reuse it. But if I have a coder ready and he has some idea what he wants to do with twins, he can simply create a preset that I then can utilize inside this node. Now this shake can be easily utilized with a single node and with specified properties that will drive the shake animation. So I'm not sure I showed you the go-to script functionality in the latest videos, so I will show you here as well. All these nodes, any of them, has this button up here. It's like bunch of lines. What this button does is it will go into the code of that specific node. So let me disable all the other uh, tabs. So as you can see, I just clicked this and it automatically goes to the debug node code base. This is very handy to get an insight into the framework, and basically if you want to create your own nodes, you can also inspect it very easily, or maybe do some changes, no problem. So if, for example, if I go to the preset as well, okay, this is very simple, actually a very simple node because it's driven by the preset. As I said in previous videos, all nodes are basically the node functionality and then the model. The model has only the properties. There are some Unity editor stuff for the inspection of the properties, but it's not really valid for runtime. It only contains the properties. And now I'm going to show you that how the evaluation or how the presets work. So for example, I have a programmer, okay, I want to create a preset that I can utilize here. Uh, Basically the node will look, there's a special attribute I've written, so it will look for all classes that implement this interface inside your code base in the main assembly, of course. So it's a very simple function, very simple interface with some basic properties, because these basic properties are driven here in animation. You can have additional properties for the preset, but there are some basic common properties. So if you implement this single function with a onComplete, it will, as you saw here, it will basically execute the preset and the node function and the node execution on the onComplete. So that's why I added this button, which is familiar already, near the preset. So if you specify any preset, this button will take you to the implementation of the preset. So let's go there. And this is our simple shake preset that will shake the direct transform. As I said, it implements the animation preset interface and it has the execute function. And there is this shake functionality. It's kind of verbose. Some of you that use .tween know that .tween has its own shake function. Unfortunately, .tween is not that easy to preview inside editor, and it's not possible to preview the shake function inside editor. So I've written my own shake function using a sequence, and then I can preview this sequence inside the editor as well. Also, here are the 3 public properties on the preset on the implementation, and these public properties will be visible here. So if I add additional public property, dash will automatically re-evaluate the inspector, and you can see there is a new property for me to use. So you can have any type of properties inside the preset. You can even utilize the properties that dash has, like the parameterization and stuff like that, if you want to. So there will be common presets coming, for example, the presets that we use, something with alpha and all that. But you can also create your own presets. You can even send me the presets. I can add them to the framework as well. So this is very handy to utilize the good things from both worlds. So you have programmers that are able to create these technical animations, and you can still use them inside Dash framework utilizing just a single node. So that's for the preset. Let's go to animation. As I said, you can use animation inside Dash, the standard animation Unity, not just Tween. And there is this node Animate with clip. It takes the standard Unity animation clip. So I created this animation clip on the title background. There is no need to have an animator on the component. It will be all implemented inside this node. So it will take this animation and basically animate instant preview, animate it using it. It will evaluate on time uh, the animation as needed. You can also evaluate in reverse, so you can reverse the animation. But if you, for example, wanted something different, you can override the time and stuff. That's pretty easy. But for example, people that work with Unity animations know that there is not an easy way to have a relative animation because it's basically evaluated on these properties and then set directly once the animation is evaluated. So the workarounds for that I've seen on the internet is using a wrapped or nested game objects transform just to have a relative animation. Uh, since I want some new functionality, not just the relative part of the animation, I want to be able to retarget the animations of part of the animations, part of the properties that are animated. At least that's in the to-do list or the wish list. I created a new type of asset, which is called the dash animation. I already have one here, and it basically takes the animation clip as an input. It deserializes, analyzes it, and it will basically create its own structures for it. You have some few of the info from the animation, from the Unity animation, but one once you have this asset, it needs to be created in editor time because evaluation of animation curves at the moment in Unity can be done only in Unity time. It cannot be done at even with reflection. It cannot be done at runtime. I already talked to the Unity engineers. I've just gave them a feature request to be able to use some of the methods because there are basically Unity helper methods inside the editor assembly that can evaluate the animation. So I need to create these assets at editor time, and then I can use them obviously at runtime. So I can use it here. I can switch to use dash animation, and as you can see, I already selected it here. And now I can have relative animation as well. So you can see it animates. If I don't select relative, it will be with the clip. It will go as it is driven from top of the screen to here, but I can basically select it to relative and it will start here. It's not really something that we want in this case, but in general, having relative Unity animations is very useful. So because you can create a single animation for an item and then use its relative position on couple, for example, on this one button, and then you can use the relative animation on all of the buttons. So at the moment you can use both, and there will be additional functionality to the dash animation asset as well. As I said, I need to do some experimenting first, like with the retargeting, but we'll see. So that's with the animation. You can basically also do all the stuff that you do with the twin animations. So you can like loop them, or you can just go one animation after another. You can go two animations at the same time, but you will have the same issue at between because they will basically overwrite themselves. So you will see that. So it's something that's obvious. So next thing that's new is for those that already saw my introduction video into Machina. As I said, there is a new feature, what's called the property referencing inside expressions, and it's already backported to here to Dash. And as I ported it from Machina to Dash, I also boosted it a bit. So now you can have a nested referencing and stuff like that. So I will show you how it's completely different from the Machina video already, but it will be ported from Dash back to Machina in the new version. So there is no need for expression functions to use referencing anymore. It's a different thing. So let's say, for example, let's set this as a preview. It's the animation to get rid of this screen, and I have this time here, which is a dot 3 seconds, and I want this time here to be driven with this by this time. So I can use a parameter or variable and then set this to this variable, but I can also reference this time. So I can all the properties can now be, if you right click them, the label, it will tell you I want to copy the reference to that property. Not all of them. For example, the easing one, not because it's a special type of property, but it will be done in the future. So let's say that I want to reference the time. So I will tell it to copy reference, and then I will okay, the time in the animation is cannot be parameterized. So I will just quickly parameterize it, or I will parameterize it in because I don't want to, it's already a long video, but I will parameterize it uh, before I release the version tomorrow, because as I said, more and more properties will be parameterized. So let's say I want to do something that can be parameterized. Okay, which for example the positions. So okay, let's say for example this. Okay, no. Let me pause here and I will parameterize the anchored position just for this because I will be back soon. Okay, I'm back. It took a bit longer than I expected. I'm not sure, almost an hour maybe. The parameterization of the properties wasn't the problem. The problem was that there were issues with the referencing value typed parameters, so I need to recreate a lot of code. Uh, so I implemented it just to show you the referencing, and I will think about refactoring it maybe, but it will have no impact on the usage. So as I said, we have this animation where we basically animate the title up and the content to the right, and I want derive this time for the anchored position for the content by this time for the title, or vice versa, and doesn't really matter. So I can just say that I want to reference this property, and I will parameterize this time, and inside the parameter I will pass this reference. So this reference is this property by the ID that I already showed you. So there is the ID of the node. So this tells us that there is this node with this ID and with this parameter time. You can even, if it was for example vector, you can do this, and that's what I meant. And you can just access, for example, the x value of the vector. This is what I said. That is nested referencing in comparison to the implementation in Machina. Also in Machina you had to use the function where one of the attributes was the ID of the node, and second attribute was a string attribute for the name for the property. So this not only utilizes its own syntax for referencing with the brackets and the dollar sign, it also can be used by this copy reference. You can write this as normal as you would like any expression. This is just to make it happen faster, and that was the problem, that this wasn't able to reference a value type of a parameter property. So now if I run it, both of them will have the same time, the 03. So for example, if I change this in only a single node to 1 second, both of them will run on that time. Also, another thing that I needed to write and to implement at the moment was to basically, because at this time we cannot in editor time we cannot resolve node flow data, so we cannot know this time. There could be exceptions, like this is a constant, so we can evaluate it and resolve the expression in an editor time to point to this constant. But there is a long story. So at the moment, all the time that is driven by expression will tell you in node that it's an exp. It's driven by an expression and should be looked into instead of having the value, because the value can be, once it's an expression, the value can be only at runtime, known at runtime, so there is no reason to try to evaluate it here or to resolve it here. I will probably change this to something more graphically different, like a different color maybe. So maybe even write the expression here if it's not too long. So that's how expressions work. So if I, for example, I can also utilize this as a expression, so I can just say that it's twice the time for the content. So you can, this is basically another property inside or parameter inside the expression, so you can utilize it as that. We can even use the modifier, the add attribute node I showed you in the last video, and add an attribute that will be taken from a reference from another node as well, no problem. So that's expression. I also want to talk about that in this release there will be additional documentation on functions that are already implemented in expressions, and also the default stuff, default info on what's supported in the expressions. This is how to resolve, how to work with the references we just talked about. So there's an additional info for you how to utilize it. In next couple of weeks, or maybe a month, we'll see. I want to focus on the documentation. So there will be a lot of documentation coming in because that's a huge part for this framework to be usable. Not only externally but internally for us as well. So I will focus on that. and because there is very little that I want to implement, at least at the moment before the final release. Then there is some stuff I've talked about, for example, with the animations that I want to explore in further. But now I need to focus on testing and I need to focus on documentation. So there will be a lot of documentation coming in. And finally, last thing I want to talk about are subgraphs. They are implemented. I didn't want to put them into this version, into the first version of Dash. I wanted to implement it later after the public release, but I've decided to give it a try, and you can test it out. It's still an experimental feature and probably will not be rolled out of experimental before even in the final release of this version. But it will be there for you to test and to give me feedback on that, and so we can work it out in detail. So let me show you. There is a special note. Okay, we need to enable the experimental. There is a special node called subgraph. Uh, it's a, it's a it's a different node from all the others. So it has no inputs and outputs because there is no graph. So it doesn't know how many inputs and how many outputs are there. So we can go to the subgraph. You'll see that we are on the screen bound, the subgraph bound. This will be refactored to because the bound needs to be only there once, but it's just the naming system. And we can go to the parent graph as well. You can have subgraph inside the subgraph inside the subgraph. It should be supported. So there is nothing here at the moment, so we can create input. And if I go to the parent, you already see that there is an input node for that. So if I create another input, there will be another one. Or I can create obviously an output, or let's create another input. It will resize to take all the inputs into account, and there is a single output as well. So if I just go here, this input will be used, the input one. Uh, I will probably make this more readable, so the names of the inputs will be here. So for example, if I delete these inputs, you will know that which input is actually used. So let's remove this and this, and just you can I will just do a debug. It's very easier. So hello world. You can also debug it inside the subgraph. So for example, if I had let's say animation with clip. Okay, let's go here. I will use the title retarget to use reference to the title one. Okay, and as you can see, you can even to run it inside a subgraph. It should work here. Also, if I go to the parent, and I will just disable this just to show you, like, if I run this, okay, I need to set as preview this one. If I run this, it will go into the subgraph and execute it. And it also evaluates if there is still something executing inside the subgraph, because there can be any number of nodes. So the evaluation, actually, the implementation of the evaluation, if this node is executing, is different, obviously, because this node execution is basically the graph execution. So I can delete this. Okay, and that's basically on the subgraphs, at least the introduction to the subgraphs. So maybe you can try them out and let me know. As I said, I will focus on documentation in the next, at least next version of the beta preview. If there is anything you encountered, any kind of documentation that you need, for example, basically any kind of feedback, it is always welcome. And even if it's bad, I mean, if you say that something is should be used differently, or for example some kind of UI is clunky and stuff like that, just let me know. We will iterate over it. So that's the great thing about feedback, and once you use it, you can encounter something that I didn't even phantom when implementing it. So uh, let me know, and that's all for now. Thanks.